All right, so for the racing game, one thing that I probably want to do with this thing is make sure that the sprite I'm using is centered so that I rotate around that. Otherwise, it's going to rotate around the upper left corner. That would be a problem. So I think I'm going to make this the My Car sprite. I want it facing to the right because that's 0 degrees, and that's what I'm going to use for all of my rotations. So for this one, I'm just going to start with this. I'll make a duplicate of this for the light version. So My Car object. So a simple way to do rotations is every step, I'm going to set the variable image_angle to be my direction. So in the Pro Edition, you're allowed to do this. It just rotates your sprite so that whatever direction you're going, it rotates at that number of degrees. That's why we have to have it starting at 0. So for direction changes, what I can do is use keyboard events for, say, left and right. When I go left, I'm going to set my direction variable to be, let's see, if I'm going to the left, I want to add 3 relative, or something like that. And if I'm going to the right, then I want to set my direction -3 relative. So if I throw the car in the room, oh, I should give it a sprite. That will help. There we go. There we go. So I'm able to change the direction now. For speed, it turns out that there is a speed variable. So we've used hspeed and vspeed before, but there's a direct speed variable as well, which is combined with direction to give us which way we're going. So if I press the up key, I can set my speed. So I'm going to start with instant acceleration and then slow away, show you another way which will allow me to do gradual speed up. But to start with, I can just set my speed to 5. This allows me to do direction changes. Now, what happens if I want this to slow down naturally? So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to use something called friction. It's just below gravity. The idea with friction is if you have any speed, every single step, it's going to subtract a certain amount from your speed until you reach 0. So in the create event, if I set my friction to something like maybe 0.1, you want it to be relatively small because it's subtracting every single step. If I start off and then let up, it slows down to a stop. There we go. If you want to stop sooner, just increase the friction. Now what about gradual speed up? So I'm directly setting the speed to 5. Probably what I want to do is I want to add to my speed until I reach some maximum speed, whatever that is. So for now, I'm going to set up a variable in the create event, which is going to be my max speed, which I'm going to set to be 5. And when I press up, I'm going to add some amount to my speed. Maybe I add, I don't know, 0.3 to my speed relative. And then I say, if it's greater than my max speed, set it to max speed. So speed is larger than max speed. Then I'm going to directly set my speed equal to max speed. That puts a top speed on the car. So I get a more gradual acceleration. All right, so that gives me some more finer controls over this. If I'm using the light edition, I'm going to need to do something similar with my image angle. The rest of this works just fine. So if I make a duplicate of this and do My Car light, I'm not allowed to use image angle, so what I have to do instead is I'm going to go edit this thing and create a cycle of sprites that goes counterclockwise. So let's do a rotation sequence counterclockwise. Let's see, how many frames should I make? Maybe maybe 36, and every 10 degrees I'll change it. Oh, before I do this, I should make sure that the image is the correct size. I need to make sure that I have enough room to rotate, so I'm going to alter my canvas so it's 80 by 80. And now I'm going to do my rotation sequence. There we go. So now it does all of the various rotations. And you can use more precise, a larger number of frames to make it smoother. And then, if I duplicate this, this is going to be my car light. In the step event, instead of changing this image angle, what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to set the sprite itself to be my car light. There's no animation speed, but the sub-image is going to be my direction divided by 10. Because there's 36 frames, if I divide by 10, it'll give me the correct sub-image. So if I'm at 90 degrees, divide by 10, it'll be frame 9. And if I go look at frame 9 is pointing up 90 degrees. If it's 180 degrees divided by 10, it's frame 18. So it's just a way of taking the, my direction and corresponding it to which frame I want. So if I go throw a light car in as well, it's a little jerkier, but it does do full rotation then. All right, something you're probably going to want to do with your courses is you're going to want to create invisible objects that are the things you collide with, and then your background is whatever you want to see. So that way you can have one collision with a particular collidable object, whatever that is, and you don't have to worry about making a collision with every possible thing you have in your game. The other thing you might want to do is something that we did in the platform game, which has to do with collisions, where when you collide with something, you use jump to the previous step and don't use solids, because solids will set your direction back to 0. So if you collide with anything solid, suddenly your car is facing to the right, because that's direction 0. So watch out for that. One other thing that might end up cropping up in your game is if you decide to put objects in that you can drive over the top of, then you might have a problem with depth. So if I just go load in some sprites, I don't know, sure. So if I put in this object here, notice that it's over the top of this other of my cars. So my cars can drive out from underneath them, but when they drive under them, that's probably not what I want. What I would probably prefer is to have them drive over the top of it. This has to do with depth. So when you want something to draw behind other things, it needs to have a higher depth. That's what this number here is. So I could either make the depth of this object more, or I can make my car's depth a negative number. Either way would work. So the larger the depth, the further from your eye it is. So if I take this object and make it just 1, for example, there it is. So now I'm able to see over the top of it. So those are the things I want to show you, how to do rotation, speed up, slow down, and how to do depth.